Hello, I'm Commissioner Ben Hovland with the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. Today we continue our 2020 Lessons Learned video series. I'm joined by Dana DeBeauvoir and Justin Roebuck. Did I get that right, Dana?
You did.
Excellent. Dana DeBeauvoir has been serving as County Clerk for Travis County, Texas since 1986 and has won several awards for her commitment to excellence in government. She also served as Texas representative on the EAC Standards Board, and we thank you for that service. Justin Roebuck has served as the County Clerk and Registrar of Deeds for Ottawa County, Michigan since 2014. Throughout that time, his goals have been excellent customer service, efficient use of taxpayer dollars, and ensuring the integrity of public records and elections in Ottawa County. In addition to his work in Ottawa County, Justin is also a member of the EAC Standards Board, where he is a new member of the Executive Board, and so we appreciate that. Thank you both for joining me today. And just to start off a little bit, I'd love to hear more about your jurisdictions, give people a sense of that. We'll go in alphabetical order on this first one. So Dana, if you can tell us a little bit more about Travis County.
Absolutely. Travis County is the hill country of Texas, so it's actually very beautiful here. We don't have that many cowboys, but we have a lot of beautiful roadways that are lined with gorgeous bluebonnets several months out of the year. We have about 900,000 registered voters, and we're going to break 1 million very soon. We've had vote centers since 2011. So there are many issues that we don't have to worry about here because we have vote centers, like voters being in the wrong place to vote. We have an aggressive early voting program that voters really love. This time around, we had a lot of our voters participate in by mail voting. Mostly the increase was among our 65-year-old local voters, and they were able to hand deliver their ballots under a special provision caused by the pandemic that said they could use that current provision in law multiple days. That will not be the case early in the future. We will go back to only one day, election day, when folks can hand deliver. Travis County never did offer 24-hour voting or drive-through voting. We did hand deliver, and there is a difference. And I think that's about it. We've had a very retail, open kind of early voting program since early voting began. The first year I started conducting elections in 1987.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think there's going to be a lot of great stuff there. And Justin, if you could tell us a little bit about Ottawa County, and also if you could add in Michigan. Runs things a little different there. And obviously in Michigan, you have a split in responsibilities between the county and your municipal clerks. And I think it'd be helpful for folks to have a better understanding of how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Commissioner. Yeah, Ottawa County is in western Michigan. We're along the Lake Michigan coastline. It's a community of about 300,000 people. We have a little over 220,000 registered voters. As you've said, I've been the clerk and registered deeds here since 2014, about 6 years prior to that, working in the election side. So very passionate about the elections process. And as you said, Michigan is a little unique in terms of how we split up the role of municipal and county governments in elections. So I have 23 municipalities within my county where the clerk of those cities and townships has a lot of direct responsibility within the election. For example, they are the ones who are receiving in and issuing the absentee or vote by mail ballots, and they are in charge essentially of appointing election inspectors. But that split's interesting because the counties train the election workers, and then we also, of course, are responsible for the certification process at the county level. So we're the ones canvassing the results after they come in. We're also the ones reporting out the results. And so there's kind of a bifurcation of responsibility there that can be challenging at times, but on the upside, it offers a check and balance in the process too.
That's great. And as we walk through some of these questions, I think where it's appropriate, obviously we definitely want to hear about how your office was impacted on some of the pandemic issues, but also if it's appropriate, if you want to talk about how it impacted your municipal clerks as well. I think that makes sense.
Definitely.
And again, we're here to talk about the 2020 election cycle, which was really an election like no other. And as we work to identify lessons learned from the election, we're talking to election officials like yourselves about how they dealt with the many challenges that 2020 presented. We've heard a lot about how the pandemic impacted election administration in 2020.
Mhm.
As we heard just in that intro, that because each state runs elections in its own way and each jurisdiction is a little different, the response to the pandemic has varied some across the country. And so just to really start things off on the 2020 election, Dana, if you want to start us off again here, can you talk about what you saw as some of the most significant changes that your jurisdiction had to make in response to the pandemic, and how that impacted voting across the board, whether that was early voting, mail absentee voting, the election day experience, et cetera, in Travis County?
Thank you, Ben. Let me start by saying that if we all remember back when COVID was brand new to us and we didn't know very much about the pandemic or the disease, we were having to face unknowns every day, and the information that we were getting from our medical authorities changed every day. So trying to change things on the fly and cope with all of the new science that was coming at us was probably the most difficult part in those early days, trying to figure out, exactly what to do. And if you remember, in the early days, the advice that was being given to us was that we had to sanitize surfaces, that was a really big and important thing. And we didn't find out until much later that really that was not that important. It was much more important to sanitize your hands, keep your face covered, and keep distance. And the surfaces were really not all that critical or risky. We didn't find out that until much later. Some of the really important things, though, were that we had to change a lot of our polling places, because the polling places that we had used in the past didn't have enough space to allow for social distancing. And a lot of the social distancing happened, outside the polling place. So we had to deal with the elements, sun, wind, rain, and what we were going to do with our poor voters stuck out in the elements. Those were all issues that we had to deal with in the past, but now we had them 100-fold. Long blocks, long lines that weren't there because we didn't have enough machines or because people had to wait very long. They were these extensive lines because everybody was spaced 6 feet apart, and it looked like a really terrible wait. I think the thing that was the most difficult to deal with was the increase in vote by mail. I mentioned that our local over 65 folks who had so enjoyed the commerce of the polling place and the getting to visit with their neighbors suddenly said, oh no, I don't want to have anything to do with COVID. I'm going to vote by mail because I can by law. And they did. They absolutely took advantage of it. And then they absolutely took advantage of hand delivery options because of the sabotage of the post office. So every time voters would think that they had a solution to their concerns and their worries, something else would happen to them. So poor voters were being struck down at every opportunity. And I think that's the thing I want to focus on today, is how much voters had to persist and persist in order to exercise their right to vote.
Well, thank you for that. And I think a lot of good points in there. I think one of the things that we've heard that remind me a lot about was how depending on when a state's primaries were. We've talked to folks who had their primary in February and missed sort of that mid-March date that everything changed. There were folks that had theirs just on the other side of that. There were states that postponed. depending on your presidential primary, your state primary, et cetera. We've heard sort of evolving experiences across the board, and I think that's a very good point that you made. Justin, how about you? What in Ottawa County, what were sort of the most significant changes that you saw in your jurisdiction and how you responded to the pandemic?
Yeah, I think I can certainly echo a lot of what Dana has brought up in terms of those polling place issues and concerns that we were having. Very similar to that. In Michigan, we actually, our presidential president's primary was on March 10, and it was the evening of Tuesday, March 10. We were about 10 o'clock in the evening, still accumulating those election results at the county, and the governor broke in for an announcement of a declaration of state of emergency in Michigan. So that was our first day, essentially, of the pandemic. And it was a fascinating time, and it was such a challenging time because as Dana was mentioning, all of the unknowns and so many of the things that we were concerned about initially, some of those things came to fruition as being real concerns, and others kind of did not. But we actually have a pretty large municipal election in my county in May. So really, we were kind of on the heels, immediately after that March election ended, we began that preparation for May. And so what was interesting and a little unique here was that in May, we had a specific executive order that sort of directed how the May special election was to be run. And that was very unique in our period. It was literally 99% vote by mail election. So it was a smaller subset of our precincts that had the election, but it was still substantial, and 99% of those voters participated by mail, which was incredible. And one also, different factor that Michigan was dealing with was that in 2018, we had a pretty substantial voter-initiated change to our constitution, which basically allowed for what we call the no reason absentee process. So previously had quite a few more restrictions regarding how people vote absentee. You had to be, over the age of 60, permanent disability, absent from your community. And the voter-initiated change in 2018 really opened that up. So we spent a lot of time in 2019 preparing for the presidential cycle and what that would look like with increase in vote by mail. And little did we know that the increase would be so dramatic and so affected, obviously, by the pandemic. So we went from, in a presidential election, previously under the old rules for absentee voting and vote by mail, we would see somewhere in the neighborhood of 25-30% vote by mail. And that switched dramatically, essentially doubled, and more than doubled in a lot of our municipalities, but countywide we were at 60% vote by mail. So our biggest, preparation really revolved around that vote by mail piece, particularly at the county level. We were purchasing additional equipment, thanks to federal grants that were distributed here by our Secretary of State's office as well. For the counting and tabulation of the absentee ballots, making sure that, and again, the tabulation happens in local jurisdictions here. So we were spread out across 23 different counting sites, making sure that we had enough equipment to go around. And then as Dana was mentioning too, the precinct setup was really critical going into those larger elections, making sure that we were prepared. Poll worker recruitment was huge. I know we may talk about that a little bit later, but that was another big one that we certainly were preparing for.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, great lead in. And you both mentioned the increase in vote by mail, and I do want to get to that in a minute. But on what you just mentioned there, Justin, and I'll start with you this time. On that in-person voting side, can you talk about any issues that you saw with recruiting poll workers, finding locations? We've heard a significant amount about senior centers not being available, et cetera. And what worked and what didn't in addressing those issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, that was one of our real concerns right out of the gate. The statistic in Michigan, at least, pre-2020, it'd be fascinating to do another poll of this and see what we're at now. But in Michigan, as we're going into the presidential election, 72% of our workforce of election inspectors were over the age of 60. And so obviously recognizing, that's not uncommon anywhere in the country, right? So recognizing that as a real need in recruitment. And little did we know there would be, interest in the process because of the politics of everything too, right? Where people are starting to ask questions and say, well, what's going on? How does this really work? And we were really trying to capitalize a little bit on that as well, to say, you know what, if you have questions, I have a great way for you to understand a little bit more about this process. You can serve your community. And at the county level, we embarked upon our own recruitment process. The state also had a tremendous recruitment effort here in Michigan. It's called the Democracy MVP program, which was very successful. And locally here as well, we did a similar thing and kind of partnered with the state, but had our own website for recruiting. We actually coupled that with online training so that someone could actually sign up, go through a whole online training and certification process. And then their information would essentially be, I guess I'm not moving as much, sorry, gotta keep my lights on. Their information would basically be listed as a backup election inspector. And what was so cool about that was that we literally recruited by the end, leading into the November election, recruited over 20% additional workforce than what we needed. And so that was amazing to see the community response from that. The polling place and polling operations, as Dana mentioned earlier, just a dramatic change in how we laid the precincts out. We have a divergence of places within the county where, some communities are very rural. We had an outhouse in one of our precinct locations up until about 2010. So, I mean, when you think about the differences, and then of course we have more urban areas. So, in some of those polling locations, it was very tight spacing, and we had to really reconfigure how that looked. And I would say too that absentee voting really contributed to the overall success of in-person voting on election day. The lines were spaced out, but actually, much more smooth in terms of the line management process because so many people were participating by mail.
That's a lot of great points there. I particularly like the encouragement of poll workers. I use something similar all the time when people are maybe not as confident as they'd like to be in the process. They say sign up to be a poll worker. I certainly I learned a lot doing it over the years and found it very valuable. So whenever I can, I try to get people to do it. But
Absolutely.
Dana, same question, just as far as on that in-person side, issues in poll worker recruiting. Obviously, you're a big college town. You have a lot of student population, location issues. Would love to hear about what worked and what didn't in addressing those challenges.
We found a couple of surprises when it came to looking for polling places as well as recruiting new people. Let me start with polling places. A lot of our traditional polling places simply would not work. And the big surprise was our most successful and most quickly established new polling places were all of the empty office buildings, where all of those office buildings, and especially the Indeed buildings and all of the software company buildings that were empty, they opened their arms to us. And that was thrilling because there were lovely facilities, lots and lots of rooms. So that worked out really, really well. And these buildings were all through town, even in our somewhat rural areas, almost everywhere you could find an empty office building. So we were fortunate in that, and we really spent a lot of time focusing on that kind of substitute for our normal places. We are still using some of those locations, and I suspect that for the upcoming November election, I'm going to be pressed back into some of our older locations, although I think the lessons learned are that we're still going to have COVID with us probably come November. Travis County just went back to stage 3 yesterday. Because of the Delta variant. So we're not done with this at all, unfortunately. Now, here was the other surprise. In past elections, when we were recruiting poll workers, The Democratic and Republican parties were our chief helpers in getting people in, and they had been our stalwarts in the past for making sure that we got people who had had experience in the past, who had already been through training. Well, so many of those folks were older. We didn't want to use them. They didn't want to serve this time around. So we really had to make an effort to find new folks. And neither of the parties turned out to be very good brokers in terms of recruiting new people, especially the Republican Party. When they were calling and doing their very best, when they were calling, they ran into a lot of skepticism. They weren't particularly trusted, and the Democratic Party less so, but the same story, in that they got a call from one of the parties, and that what they ran into was somebody saying, well, yeah, you just want to put me in a polling place. You don't really care about me. Riding to the rescue, though, was the League of Women Voters. They were trusted. And when they told a potential worker, no, the county clerk has made arrangements for lots of PPE and shields and, protections for, masks and protections for how you touch things and lots of cleaning, all of that. When they heard all of that from a trusted source, then they were willing to sign up. So I give huge credit to the League of Women Voters for stepping up last time and helping us recruit. And as a result of their efforts, we now have a whole nother cadre of younger people who are now working in elections. And that's something that I think is going to stick with us for the future.
Yeah, that's something I certainly hope is a silver lining out of 2020, that you saw a new generation of poll workers step, and I hope they continue to show up. Because again, having done that myself, I know that it is a rewarding experience, or I found it one, and I hope the new folks did as well. But Dana, right there, you hit on something. You mentioned the PPE. How different polling places looked last year. Can you talk about, I guess, both for your early in-person, your vote centers, and election day, just both how the polling place looked different, and then if you had any issues, with things that came up maybe this year that were a little different, whether it be more reasons for provisional ballots, or technical issues, or voter registration issues because DMV closures, et cetera. Any sort of stuck out as being different in 2020?
There were a lot of issues like that, especially with voter registration. And since I don't conduct voter registration, it's a split office in a lot of counties in Texas. There was the difficulty in communication between the two offices. That's simply a part and parcel of the structure of the two different offices. It's a built-in inefficiency, and maybe one of these days we'll fix that. The other thing that I think was something that we had to come to a conclusion about was, it wasn't so much about the building itself, but the arrangement of the layout, as Justin mentioned, the arrangement of the layout. We had to make sure that we had separate entrances and exits, no matter where we were, because we couldn't afford to have voters crossing over in front of each other when they were going to the booths or when they were coming in or heading out the door. So everything we did was to make sure that we kept them as far away from each other as possible, and they didn't crisscross. That was our biggest challenge. And for the most part, we were able to design places that didn't allow them to cross. Provisional ballots were more of an issue, and it was mostly address updates that caused the issue. And we ended up having to greatly increase our ballot board. We had to triple the normal size of the ballot board in order to handle that. And we had to triple the size of the signature verification committee too, just to handle, all of the extra ballot by mail for people who didn't want to come inside, and then all the extra provisional ballots. The cost of the election skyrocketed astronomically. Normally in Travis County for a big election, it cost us $1 million or $1.2 million. That basic level for elections for the future has now doubled. It will cost us just a little over $2 million every election. However, the November election, our first time to be fully prepared to operate in a pandemic, that November election cost us $6.4 million.
Wow.
That it was amazing. We got $1.5 million in a grant to help us get through it. So we had a little bit of help, but county government had to fund all of those additional costs for all the safety features and the extra personnel and extra security to take care of voters to make sure that they were safe.
And was some of that, was that CARES Act sub-granted from the state, or was that a CTCL grant, or?
It was both. It was both. Yes, CARES, CTCL, and then the Zuckerberg grants too.
Yeah.
All of it.
Um,
We took help from everybody who offered it.
Yeah, again, an election like no other, hopefully, knock on wood.
No, I'm not sure I'm willing to buy that. I think we're in this for a longer haul.
Yeah, you may be right. Well, that's all the more reason that we need to learn these lessons, these valuable lessons, and strive forward. Justin, how about in Ottawa County? Both the early in-person experience and election day, just what looked different? What were the major issues that came up, or the voter experience, or you saw?
Yeah, some of our issues too revolved around that change in 2018 to our election law, because additionally to the absentee change, we actually implemented in-person same-day registration. So very significant change in the way that Michigan had structured that. Thankfully, we had kind of some of the smaller municipal elections in 2019 to work up to the big cycle. But we literally had implemented it in our local clerk's offices. So, in my case, 23 local jurisdictions where voters would go, and this includes not only new voter registration, but also change of address. And that, ironically, it really limited the number of provisional ballots that we would have seen earlier were substantially reduced because of that same day registration transaction. And so the process was not done in the precinct. It wasn't as people walked in to go and vote. They would actually have to be sent back to the municipal office to have that handled. But just in our county, and again, we're 220,000 registered voters at the time of the November election, we saw over 1,000 same-day registrations. So that's significant, and certainly a lot of the college communities across Michigan saw even greater numbers. We had people literally in line to do that same-day registration process. But overall, what was remarkable about that as well is not that it was not challenging, not that there were not lines at times, but the vote by mail process actually did reduce the stress on a lot of the other processes that were occurring at the same time. And we had sort of a year to kind of prepare, recognizing that the law changed. We know that people like voting by mail. We know that this is going to increase. So as we were preparing for that, the pandemic hit. And so that did alleviate a lot of stress on us. I will agree too, with Dana on the funding. It's such a dramatic increase that we've seen not only at the county level, but within our municipalities as well, having to pay for PPE and the additional things that were directly related to the pandemic, but also just recognizing our infrastructure is in desperate need of more resources in general. The burden on our local clerks is really significant, particularly in the signature verification process and all the processes that go into verifying votes by mail prior to them ever being counted on election day. And they need staffing. They need more resources, more permanent resources ongoing. And this is something that's going to be critical in conversations in the future. The Michigan legislature right now is debating a measure to actually prohibit any outside funding in elections, which is, obviously we're seeing this all over the country in different ways. But it's fascinating to me because, my sheriff has a canine unit that are completely paid for by great and generous individuals and organizations within the county. There's a lot of examples, right, of private partnership with county government and with municipal government to help serve citizens well. And I believe strongly in transparency. We have to be transparent about how we're spending those dollars. But the fact that coming out of a pandemic election, we have people in the legislature trying to prohibit us from funding, but also not funding our operations, is really a threat, I think, to our, to the fundamental work that we're doing. And so I think that's going to have to be something that we see ongoing.
It seems needlessly restrictive. Why would you turn down help from people? There isn't a legitimate answer for it.
Yeah.
Well, I know we have consistently heard the issue about the funding challenges, and that's not new to elections, but I think both, of course, the demands of 2020, but generally, I think the demands and the expectations on election administration, we're really seeing the importance and need for that investment. Of course, as the EAC distributes the congressional funding through HAVA and through the CARES Act money, we also get to see firsthand the great work that's done with that money and the difference that it makes. So, that's an important story to tell as well. Justin, you hit it on it there a couple times, and actually one of the things that you said, reminded me, throughout the year, I really liked the messaging around, that making your plan to vote, or the idea that the voter education piece of understanding your options and seeing how people across the country were able to spread that vote out, to have record amounts of mail-in absentee voting, record amounts of early voting, and then still a very large election day, because we had a record amount of people vote across the country, but done in a way that it spread out that vote, that you saw that social distancing. And so talking about the mail absentee voting side, you already mentioned you saw a significant increase in 20. Can you talk about how that looked different? Again, you also mentioned no excuse absentee was new to Michigan, but if anything with application process or drop boxes or the performance of the USPS cure process issues, et cetera, anything that you experienced or challenges associated with the increase in mail balloting with the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the more significant things, Michigan's one of the states that did a complete statewide mailing of registered voters, offering them an application to vote. It was still an application process, but every voter on the rolls essentially received an application, and of course that dramatically increased the process as well, right? As more people just were aware of the fact that this law change existed and that they could do this. And I touched on it just a minute ago as well in terms of resources, but one of the biggest challenges we had, I think, in 2020 with regard to the mail-in vote was the fact that our local units of government and local clerks, during the pandemic, offices shut down, the social distancing measures and things that they had to do to mitigate even their own employees coming in. They were faced in the weeks leading up to the election with a whole lot of signature verification issues. This was kind of compounded by the fact that our DMV, which is actually the Secretary of State's office in Michigan, one of the benefits we have is that our Secretary of State not only does elections, but also motor vehicles. And so the driver license file is connected to the voter file. And that's great. The problem is the DMV is closing, and basically folks really backed up in line trying to renew their driver's license and change their address, for example. Signatures that were in need of being updated on the voter file, and that transaction normally happens at the DMV. And so a lot of phone calls back and forth with voters and mailing documents back and forth to voters just in the signature verification and curing those things prior to election day. That was a big one for us as well. One of the things that we experienced with this huge influx, doubling our numbers, were drop box locations, trying to figure out how do we handle absentee voter drop boxes. And I think that's something we need to deal with in the future as well, making that more uniform across our state, because local communities were handling this in different ways. A rural community might have a different type of drop box, or maybe a slot in the door on the township hall or something. And more of what some of our urban communities had, video monitoring and more sophisticated means of providing drop boxes. But so that was a challenge for us as well, and making sure that our voters felt comfortable and secure in putting their ballots in. So yeah, a lot of those things revolving around that process. We also, of course, as I think Dana mentioned earlier, the post office challenges were significant. And in Michigan, because drop boxes the ballot receipting in the ballots are local. So it's not just anywhere in the county, but you actually have to return your ballot to your municipal clerk. And so what we were seeing was folks would drive by somewhere on their way to work or something and see a drop box. And it said, put your ballot here. And they said, okay, great. And so there was all of this back and forth transportation of ballots with clerk staff. So that was another, significant challenge kind of tied in or related to the mail-in ballot process.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, Dana, again, you mentioned the increase in mail ballots earlier, but and some of the challenges that you all that you faced, but would love to sort of drill down on that a little bit more, and how you adapted and overcame some of those challenges, or what those were.
Right. Before COVID, when we lived in a more normal world, it would have been commonplace for us to have about a 10% turnout in by mail voting, and about half of that would have been considered local, and about half of it would have been considered UOCAVA voters. Those numbers changed dramatically with COVID. For the November election, almost little less than 35% of voters cast a by mail ballot. It was a huge percentage, and it did take a lot of pressure off of election day. But once Texas figured, and most of the increase came from local over 65. So the big swell of voters were right here in town. And there was a lot of false media out there talking about how, these were, foreigners that were trying to vote in our elections, and the state government officials were trafficking all kinds of, bad, big lies about who was voting. And it was up to us, those of us conducting the election, to explain to people that, no, this is your neighbor who voted by mail, and this is a lot of your neighbors who voted by mail. And at one point, on the very first day that we were allowed to have voters bring their by mail ballot into us and hand deliver it and actually put it in the ballot box, since we don't have drop boxes, we just have hand delivery. On the very first day, the governor at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, in the middle of the day of all of this, closed down hand delivery. There were 11 lanes that I had opened up in 3 places in the downtown area, along with another office that I had. In order to make voters feel confident that they were, in fact, not being squelched and not being suppressed, it was important to come right back out and fight back against that obvious suppression. So I took the 11 lanes that I had planned for downtown, moved everything up to the elections office, which was the only place I was now allowed to offer hand delivery, one office. And I created 16 lanes of drive up hand delivery. So we still had drive through, and it was still hand delivery, and it was a much more increased service that we could offer to voters. And I think it was really important for voters to see in your face that our elections office will not allow anybody to suppress your right to vote and your right to vote safely. And I think that's one of the things that we've learned about conducting elections in these awful times, is that it's important to fight back every single chance you get. Do not let voters see themselves being compromised, and that the only person can do that is the person who's actually conducting the election. And if I might add just one more thing to that, independently elected officials, while it may seem a little strange to have somebody who's actually on the ballot conducting the election, we have a much bigger and stronger voice in conducting the election and taking care of voters than anybody who is an appointed elections administrator, because appointed election administrators are much more likely to be threatened by their boards to either sit down and shut up and not say anything, or be fired or otherwise threatened. There isn't any board that can threaten me. And so I can come right back out and say, voters, I've got your back, and you are going to get the chance to vote in as many safe ways as we can think of.
Well, and we know that you'll say that, Dana. I think though you raise a great point, and again, I mean, election officials across the country, did such an amazing job
They
with
did.
all the challenges in front of them. And one of the big ones, and it came in varying forms in varying states, but were the last minute changes, whether it was changing guidance from the CDC or otherwise that we talked about earlier, but also all the litigation, court challenges, rulings, etc. I mean, emergency legislative sessions. There really were a lot of moving parts that had to be adapted to quickly, and wholesale process changes. That again, that's also part of why you saw the cost increases, because you were changing significant direction in how elections are run. But along those lines, as we look at those changes, Dana, we'll start with you this time. When you look at the changes that were made around 2020, do you have a sense of which you see that will be that'll continue on in the future, and which were maybe temporary? That were a 2020 or at least a COVID pandemic specific change.
You want me or Justin to answer it?
Dana, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I will. Well, I think unfortunately the whole fighting back scenario and sticking up for voters is here to stay, and I wish that weren't the case, but I think that's right. And I think it's important for them to hear a voice sticking up for them, because there's so much bad information and misinformation out there. And I'm reminded of the Goebbels quote, if y'all remember that. A lie that's told once is just a lie. A lie that's told 1,000 times becomes the truth. That's a Joseph Goebbels quote. And unfortunately, it carries a lot of truth with it. So what we have to do is be much more proactive about getting out there and trying to correct and cancel the lies, and getting voters correct information. It's a whole lot more outreach. And there have to be more surrogates who can get out there and start talking, and immediately correct whatever somebody says on Facebook. And that took a lot of people pitching in, making sure they had the correct information first, and then sending it out as quickly as possible. That's something that's not going to change. We're going to have to fight back even more than we ever did before. I do think that some of the PPE and the social distancing, as we begin to get more of our people vaccinated, and I do hope that people begin to realize that we need science-based thinking along these lines, and we need to have everybody vaccinated, that when we get to that point, it will be less critical that every single person wear a mask and be socially distanced. We'll live in a kinder, gentler world once we're all vaccinated. So some of that PPE stuff, I think, will fall by the wayside later on, and that will be a lot less expensive and a lot less burdensome on our people who are working in the polling place. The same language that you're finding in, I believe it's now 46 states, in the increased penalties for maybe mistakes on the place of poll workers, and the increased partisanship behavior on the part of poll watchers is something that is going to continue for the future, and that is deeply concerning. We had one of our poll watchers who behaved so badly, and insane, and was yelling and screaming and pounding on the glass and just being horrible, that her fellow poll watchers turned her into the authorities, and she was arrested on 2 counts, one of criminal trespass and the other of perjury. And then there was another person who was arrested because they behaved so badly. I do think that we're going to have to educate our public, our voters who are in the polling place, that they have the right to speak up. You know, there's that quiet in the polling place that's been imposed for so long. I think we're going to see a different attitude in the polling place. It's going to become more of voters sticking up for themselves in there and calling out that awful partisan behavior that attempts to disrupt voters while they're trying to vote, and getting voters to stick up for themselves is, I think, a new thing for the future. We're not going to see the polling place continue to be the quiet, safe haven it's always been. Unfortunately, I think that's going to go by the wayside. I think we're going to see a place where it's going to be louder, it's going to be more contentious, and I hope voters will stick up for one another and stick up for themselves and call out this disruptive behavior to try to stop it. So there's some examples of some things that are going to be different for the future, and hopefully these are some of the things that people haven't quite thought of, because I think there are some obvious things that are on that list of things we could talk about, but perhaps these are a little bit different.
Well, and I think the point, one of the things, we absolutely saw in 20 was more people heard more about the scope of the election process than probably ever before. Most years, people tune in election night, hear the results, tune out. We've obviously talked about audits and canvass process and all these pieces a lot more, but as people, as Americans, as voters, tune into that, it is a challenge to help folks understand the process that election officials know so well. There is all this nuance, there is all this detail, there are all these safeguards that are put in place to ensure the integrity of the election. And so, Justin, same question to you as far as what changes that you saw in 2020 that you think will stick around for future years, and or any that were maybe just temporary?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And I think at the top of my list was very similar to what Dana first mentioned, which is that proactive communication that's needed with our communities. I think we saw the real importance of being engaged and active. And what I've said quite a bit, to some of our local clerks and my staff is that, I'm kind of a nerd, and nerds sometimes aren't great at, nerds are good at doing the nerd jobs and focusing on things. But sometimes they're not great at communicating what they're doing to everyone. And that is going to become so critical, I think, as we're moving forward, because I think the real way to stop some of this misinformation is not, oftentimes we're left trying to respond or react to all these individual things. And I think what we need to start focusing on, at least for me and in my community, is building the foundation of proactive, consistent, factual information that's just constantly coming out. And we really did make an attempt to do that, early on, kind of recognizing some of the rhetoric that was coming out of the national election before even the pandemic, right? We all were somewhat aware of what was going to happen. And so, we consistently began doing that. And I really do want to keep that up. We offered, one of the things that I really enjoyed was Facebook Live. We did a fireside chat Facebook Live with me and some of my staff, and it got, a lot of traction in terms of, different folks within the community reacting to that. So really hoping to continue that. I think, as we look at some of the things that realistically we're going to have to do differently too. I know we talk a lot about absentee ballots and that process, but I think that's here to stay in Michigan. I think that particularly with our constitutional amendment that was voter initiated. We know that our voters like being able to participate that way. And so some of that infrastructure that we built up, I think we're going to need to continue building on and making sure that stays. And I agree, you know, hopefully some of the more very specific pandemic related items will go away. Some of the PPE and some of the shielding and the spacing and the things that were particularly challenging with this cycle in our precincts. Hopefully we can begin to kind of wind that down, but also recognizing that, you know, we have recruited a new workforce. Not to say that, you know, that our previous workforce isn't going to be involved as well, but one of the things that I think most encouraged me about this whole process, and it was sometimes a very discouraging year, but I got a lot of calls from people saying, how can I help? I think it was one of the top questions that we got, and we got a lot of questions about the process, but one of the main ones was, what can I do to help? And I'm so encouraged by that, and I hope that that is one of the things that we can kind of, you know, we, as you mentioned, Commissioner, we have this interesting challenge in 2020 that kind of brought the spotlight that's still on the election process, and people are more aware and more engaged. We just recently filled a staff position in our elections team here, and I was amazed at, you know, in the job market right now is hard for hiring, and I was amazed at the number of people that we had interested in the position, a number of relevant experience related kind of, you know, people who were really coming up and saying, like, I want to participate in this. This is interesting. So I think hopefully some of that stuff is here to stay as well. But I think, you know, we have to continue the fight for our voters, recognizing that elections is critical infrastructure. We need local, state, and federal investment in that infrastructure. I also think one of the other things we need to be able to focus on too is our own accountability. The reality is we're not perfect. You know, there was a lot of misinformation out there about the process, but we also have to be introspective and accountable to our voters and to be able to say, look, there's some things we need to change. One of the things I really appreciate is the document that was just released by the EAC on best practices on chain of custody. Because personally, that's something that I think I need to get better at. So let's look at those kinds of things to say, now that the spotlight's here, we can do some things better. We can clean some things up. We can make sure that we're doing the best for our voters. So hopefully that's a good change too.
Well, thank you for mentioning that document. Sorry that fill that staff position. That was part of a former Justin's team came to our team, and also joined Tina Barton on the Michigan portion of the EAC, which we're proud to have, and they're doing great work, which is exciting. But you know, Justin, you just hit on it there, and of course we could talk all day about this, but in the interest of time, we'll wrap up on this one, which is you know, again, as you look at the lessons of 2020, and you hit on one, so you got to come up with another one. You know, what do you see, or what have you identified that you would want to work on to improve going into 22 and beyond?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And honestly, there's a lot of things, you know, recognizing that I think we're in a new era, as Dana has kind of mentioned a couple of times. We're in a, you know, the elections world of, you know, 10 and 20 years ago is different. It's completely different. And there's some really good things that go along with that, right? The increase in change in our technology and the way that we're using technology to communicate and do things more efficiently. And the scrutiny can also be a good thing if it comes in the light of helping us get better at what we do. And I think, you know, for us, a couple of the things that we want to continue focusing on are that communications piece. You know, building that into our infrastructure, so that it's not just about us communicating when it comes up to an election, but so that it's more of a consistent process, that as we mature as an organization in our office, in our community, that's more of a built-in process. I think I touched earlier on, honestly, I'd like to see some legislative reforms here in Michigan specifically. One of those things is the training of election challengers. Here in Michigan, election challengers are not required to be trained in terms of their they can be they have to be certified by a political party or organization, but that does not require specific training. So what we had was an incredible amount of misinformation, and I honestly believe a lot of it was unintentional on the part of the election challengers, just not even understanding what they were seeing, and they were concerned because they heard a lot of other things, but they didn't know what they were seeing. So that's something that we really need to focus on here as well. And I think one of the other things is the openness of our process in Michigan, kind of a fluke of the legislation that requires post-election auditing does not require it to be public. So that's something that I'm working on here within our state, is saying, like, we need this to be public. Like, there's nothing we're hiding here. Believe me, we want people to come in and see how accurate our elections are. So let's make sure that that's open to the public. So just a couple of those things around transparency, to things that I think we need to build on.
Absolutely. Dana, I'll give you the last word on this, on things that you learned out of 20 that you'd like to improve on going forward.
Yes, let me just say one thing about how election administrators and election officials operate. When you just heard Justin talk now about his willingness to be open and have plenty of transparency, so many of us are like that. And we were badly abused against our general nature to be open and willing to teach people and share what the processes are. I had one poll watcher who was part of a group who was attempting to stand on top of our election workers, especially in the counting station, either deliberately trying to infect them with COVID or trying to send that message to be intimidating. One of these workers took off her face mask and said, "Here," and threw it in the face of one of my middle-aged female minority receptionist workers, and said, she said, "I've already had COVID. Here, I'm gifting you with my antibodies." That is what we're having to put up with for the future. And that is very hard to cope with when your instinct is to welcome them in and show them everything you've got. Now, I also think that for the future, we've got another fight on our hands. Y'all may remember way back at the turn of the century, when we were still fighting the fight about DREs, that there were all these criticisms about DREs. Oh, somebody might be able to get into it somehow and do something sometime, and then the election would somehow be, and it was never anything specific. There was some Trojan horse thing, maybe somewhere, sometime, and you could never find anything to be specific about. To the extent that we could find somebody that could identify a pathway for us that these pieces of equipment could be compromised, then you could think up a mitigator, a way to prevent or protect that particular pathway from being hacked or being compromised. We're about to go through the same thing again. I'm sorry to say. Star Vote was all about teaching people that large jurisdictions need electronic support. It isn't a would be nice to have, it is a need. We have to have it, especially if we're going to offer voters countywide voting and special programs like same-day registration, which are fabulous for them. But if we're going to do that, then we have to have electronic support. So now we've got paper trails. They've pounded on us enough that voters think that the absolute, pièce de résistance is a paper trail. So, okay, we got them a paper trail now. And now there's even further pushback that these paper trails are also not good enough. And the computer scientists that were part of that original attack are now beginning to attack ballot marking devices, saying that, oh, they could be hacked because somebody could do something sometime somewhere that would then cause something to happen, and then your election would be compromised. And once again, they're not specifying what the pathway is or what the thing is that somebody somewhere might do, and you're left with this vague notion among voters that they might get compromised. So I'm beginning to talk to a group of people, just like we did with Star Vote, to say, put up your, your facts, because if there is something wrong with ballot marking devices, then there is a pathway. And if there is a pathway, then it can be protected and the risk can be reduced. And large jurisdictions can and should have electronic support. We're fixing to see this fight all over again, and I just can't believe it. So stay tuned for more on that, because I'm, I would have thought Star Vote would have taught these people that lesson, and apparently not.
Well, you are right that we'll need to stay tuned as we are short on time, but enjoyed this conversation. And a big thank you to Dana DeBeauvoir and Justin Roebuck for joining me today. We look forward to continuing to have conversations like this as we all work to make our democracy stronger and to help Americans vote. Thank you.
It was nice to be with you, Justin. Ben, good to see you again.
Thanks so much, guys. Both of you. Really appreciate it.